Would you dare venture into the unknown? What would be waiting at the other end? When Devon was 18, his grandfather passed away, leaving behind a dusty old map marked with strange symbols and annotations. Devon's older cousin Mia was fascinated by the mysterious map, and so the two of them, along with their friend Leo, decided to take a road trip through the Midwest to explore some of the locations their grandfather had noted. It was late summer, and the open highway seemed like the perfect place to find adventure. Or at least, that's what they thought. The map led them to small towns and forgotten landmarks, some little more than overgrown ruins or faded memories. They drove for hours, sometimes in silence, sometimes with the windows down and the radio blasting. The sky turned from orange to purple as twilight descended, and soon they were surrounded by fields stretching endlessly in all directions. As night fell, they realized they needed to stop for gas. They hadn't seen a station for miles. But then, as if appearing out of nowhere, they spotted a dimly lit diner off the side of the road. It was one of those old-fashioned places, chrome-plated and retro, with a flickering neon sign that read, "Billy's 24/7." The gas station next to it had only one pump, but it was enough. "Weird," Mia muttered as they pulled in. "This place wasn't on the map." Devon shrugged. "We've been on back roads for a while, probably just missed it." They parked at the pump, and the three of them stepped out of the car. Devon felt it first, a heaviness in the air, a subtle wrongness that he couldn't quite place. The diner was mostly dark inside, except for a single bulb flickering at the counter. A few cars were parked in the lot, but the place seemed empty, and yet there was a sense that they were being watched. "I'll fill the tank," Leo said, trying to keep things light. "You two go grab some food or something." Mia and Devon nodded and headed for the diner, but before they reached the door, Devon stopped. Something wasn't right. "Do you see that?" he asked Mia, nodding towards the entrance. Two men stood just outside the door, still as statues. They were both dressed in faded, worn-out clothes that looked out of place like something from decades ago. And they weren't moving, not talking, not shifting their weight, not even blinking. Just standing there like they were waiting. Mia swallowed hard. "Let's get back to the car." Before they could turn around, the door to the diner creaked open and a woman stepped out. She was pale, her eyes wide and unblinking. "You folks need something?" Her voice was flat, mechanical. Devon forced a smile. "Just getting some gas." The woman didn't respond, her gaze fixed on them in a way that made Devon's skin crawl. He glanced over at Leo, who was still struggling with the pump. "It's not working," Leo called out. His voice cracked with frustration, but there was something else too, a rising fear. Mia took a step back toward the car. "Let's go. I don't like this place." Suddenly, the two men by the door moved, but not like normal people. Their heads turned first, slowly like marionettes. Their bodies remained still, and their eyes, if you could call them that, were dark. Not just dark, but empty, like hollow pits where something had once been. Devon's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't look away. "Devon, get in the car," Mia's voice broke his trance, and they both sprinted back to the vehicle. Leo jumped into the driver's seat, his hands shaking. "Screw the gas, let's go." As the engine roared to life, Devon glanced in the rearview mirror. The men had turned their whole bodies now, still staring at them, unblinking. The woman from the diner stood behind them, her expression blank, as if none of it mattered to her. As they sped down the highway, the diner and its ghostly figures disappeared into the distance, swallowed by the darkness. It wasn't until they reached the next town that they finally pulled over, their hands trembling. None of them spoke for a long while. They all knew what they'd seen, but none of them wanted to say it aloud. The next day, they tried to retrace their steps, to find the diner again. But no matter how far they drove, there was no trace of it. The map, which had led them to so many places, showed no sign of Billy's 24/7s. And when they asked the locals about it, they were met with the same confused looks and shrugs. Years later, Devon would occasionally look up the old roads, wondering if they'd simply imagined it all. But deep down, he knew the truth. There was something out there, on those lonely highways, something waiting in the shadows, hidden just out of sight, and once you found it, you could never quite forget. When I was 12, my parents moved us into a quiet, nondescript neighborhood nestled at the edge of town. Our new house was old but charming, with ivy creeping up its brick walls and a sprawling backyard that led to an even more mysterious piece of land, a forgotten playground. The playground had once been part of a daycare, long since abandoned and overgrown. Rusting swings creaked in the wind, their chains coated in decades of neglect, and a merry-go-round stood still, frozen in time. The whole place felt like a relic of a childhood long lost, a place where laughter had once filled the air but had since been swallowed by silence. It was the type of place that, despite its eerie appearance, beckoned to kids like me, filled with curiosity. I began spending more and more time there after school, kicking around old, deflated soccer balls and imagining what the place might have been like when it was full of life. My younger brother Sam followed me around everywhere, and soon it became our secret hangout. Then one afternoon, Sam came running into the house, pale and shaking. "I saw her," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I saw a little girl at the playground." I raised an eyebrow. "What girl? No one's been in that playground for years." Sam shook his head, his eyes wide with fear. "She was there. She was standing on the swings, just staring at me." I brushed him off, thinking he was just trying to spook me. But the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time we went to the playground, there was this strange sensation of being watched. The once harmless swings now seemed to sway on their own, even when there wasn't any wind. A week later, everything changed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I spotted something strange. The swings, empty as always, were moving, but this time there was a faint figure sitting on one of them. It was a young girl, no older than 6, her hair matted and wild, wearing a tattered dress. She was looking at me, but her eyes were hollow, empty pits of darkness. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I turned to grab Sam to get us out of there, but he was already running toward the figure as if drawn to her. "Wait!" I screamed, my voice cracking with panic. But before I could reach him, the girl vanished. Gone. As if she had never been there. Sam stopped in his tracks, confused, looking around wildly. "I saw her," he murmured again, tears welling up in his eyes. We bolted back home, our hearts racing. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that girl and the strange pull she had on Sam. The next day I did some digging. I asked around the neighborhood, looking for any clue about the playground's history. That's when I found out the truth. Years ago, a tragic accident had taken place at the daycare that once stood there. A little girl had gone missing after school hours, and no one had ever found her. They searched the playground, the woods beyond, and even drained a nearby lake. But she was simply gone. The only thing they ever found was a small skeletal hand caught in the merry-go-round. It wasn't long after that discovery that the daycare shut down for good. The place was left to rot, and the girl's story faded into local legend. When I told Sam what I'd found, he refused to go back to the playground. But the strange thing is, ever since that day, he's had nightmares. He wakes up screaming, saying the same thing over and over. "She's still there. She wants to play." We moved away from that house a few months later, and I've never been back. But sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the sound of the swings creaking in the wind, and I wonder if she's still waiting. Months after we moved away, I read a local news article. A group of kids had gone missing near the old playground. Their pictures were plastered all over the news, and I recognized one of them, a little girl with matted hair and a tattered dress. The same girl I had seen swinging that day. And in the picture, she was smiling. but it wasn't the smile of a child. It was the smile of something that had been waiting. Thanks for diving into the shadows with us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the truth is scarier than fiction. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.